Three people get the same bad news. One turns it into a test of whether they're capable. Another waits for somebody else to tell them it's okay to act. And the third stops mentioning it entirely and carries it until it's too big to explain. Same news, three completely different weights. I'm Kevin Allen Kerber. This is the Pressure Audit Kit walkthrough of the fifth and insightful worksheet, Pressure Topology. By the end of doing this one, you'll have both your patterns named, the one you live in and the one that shows up right behind it. That matters because these things arrive in stages, and a stage you can name is a stage you can step out of. What pressure topology means, plainly, pressure has a shape, and yours has a usual one. 8 patterns arranged around a circle, 2 lines at the bottom, most familiar pattern and secondary pattern. And a note that matters. These are structures, not identities. More than one can be running at once. This page isn't asking which one you are. It's asking how pressure is organizing itself right now. I'm going to take them in pairs because that's how they actually show up. Each pair tends to chain. First pair, proving and collapse. Proving means identity is on trial. The rule underneath it is I have to prove I'm capable. Watch what that does to a task. A presentation stops being a presentation and starts being evidence you still belong in the role. A money setback stops being a problem and starts being a verdict on whether you're competent. And because identity's at stake, an ordinary mistake feels enormous compared to what it actually costs. Proving also makes wins hard to keep. One finished thing doesn't settle the case because the next thing immediately becomes new evidence. Collapse is when effort stops feeling connected to results. It usually comes after a long stretch of trying. You worked, adjusted, researched, tried again, and the outcome didn't move. So eventually the effort stops meaning anything. But the only instruction available is still try harder, which burns you down without giving anything back. That can look like shutdown and avoidance. It can also look like frantic overwork with no believable connection to the result. Listen for both sentences running at the same time. Nothing I do changes this. And more force is still the only answer. Second pair is caretaking and silence. Caretaking means other people's comfort became your assignment. The rule is, if someone's upset, I failed. That's not the same as caring. Caring notices somebody's experience and responds where you're actually responsible. Caretaking turns their emotional state into your performance review. A reasonable boundary starts to feel wrong because someone doesn't like it. An honest answer feels dangerous because it might disappoint. You end up managing tone, timing, and information, all aimed at keeping anyone from being uncomfortable. Silence follows naturally. You stop telling people what you're carrying. The rule is talking about it makes it more real, or talking about it makes me a burden. And silence removes the possibility of accurate support. People see the performance. They don't see the load. So you keep saying it's fine until the situation is genuinely hard to explain because so much of it never got said. That's the second thing silence does, and it's quieter. It keeps the pressure vague on the inside, too. Saying one clear sentence out loud would force the thing to take shape, and a shape might require a decision. Another pair, permission and everything. Permission means action feels unsafe without approval. The rule is I need somebody to confirm I'm allowed. This isn't the same as getting good advice. It's the pattern where approval becomes the condition for movement. When you already know what you want to do and it still feels exposed until someone else signs off. Sometimes the authority is a person, sometimes it's an institution, an audience, or somebody imagined. Everything means all the problems feel connected. The rule is I have to solve everything before I can breathe. You sit down to answer one email and immediately remember the bill, the appointment, the unfinished room, the hard conversation, the decision you've been putting off, and each one seems to prove none of the others can be handled on its own. The issues probably are connected. That part's often true. The pattern is when no single action gets to count until the whole system is resolved. These two pair up because together they make movement almost impossible. No decision feels safe until every consequence has been settled and somebody else has confirmed it. Another pair, knowledge and spiritual override. Knowledge means understanding is expected to equal resolution. The rule is I know better, so I should be doing better. You understand the pattern. You know the technique. You've explained this to somebody else. So you conclude it shouldn't be affecting you. And that turns learning into an accusation. You use what you know to invalidate the distance between understanding something and changing it. Spiritual override is the next step out. The rule there is if I were more evolved, this wouldn't bother me. Anger becomes evidence of low awareness. Fear becomes a failure of trust. Exhaustion means alignment slipped. You go looking for the lesson or the meaning before you've acknowledged what's actually happening and how you actually feel about it. It's a tricky trap. To be clear, the issue isn't the practice. The practice may be excellent. The issue is the practice being used to disqualify evidence. Take a second and look at all 8. Proving, everything, permission, collapse, caretaking, silence, knowledge, override. Now the first line at the bottom. Your most familiar pattern. Pick the one that describes how pressure is intensifying right now. Sophistication isn't the test here, and neither is comfort. The right one is whichever explains what the pressure is actually doing. Here's a way to find it. Say your project's behind. Proving might be active because your professional identity feels like it's on the table. Everything might also be there because the delay woke up every other unfinished thing. So which arrived first? If the first thought was, this proves I'm not capable, that's proving. If the first thought was, I can't deal with this until I clear the whole backlog, that's everything. The first thought is usually the primary. Write it down. Second line, the secondary pattern, the one that comes next or backs the first one up or takes over when the first strategy stops working. I gave you 4 common pairs. but yours doesn't have to be its partner. Somebody starts in caretaking, gets resentful, hides that behind silence, and ends up alone. Somebody starts in silence about a health condition because they don't want to worry anyone, then moves into knowledge because they think they should be able to regulate their own reaction to it. Pick the second one that most often joins the first. Now look at the two together. The label isn't the value, the relationship is, because each of these costs something specific. Proving cost rest, because every task stays a test. Everything cost movement. Permission cost time and ownership. Collapse costs access to the actions that would still work. Caretaking costs honest limits. Silence costs support. Knowledge costs patience with how long change actually takes. And override costs contact with what's true. You don't have to condemn any of these. Each one is trying to solve something real. Proving is trying to secure belonging. Permission is trying not to choose alone. Caretaking is trying to protect a connection. Silence is trying to prevent exposure. Knowing what a pattern is for makes it a lot easier to respond to without treating it as who you are. Now go back to the pressure reduction menu and look at the action you chose. One question: does it interrupt the pattern or does it quietly serve it? Because work all night looks like completion, and it might be proving. Ask 3 more people what they think looks like support, and it might be permission. Meditate until I feel positive looks like regulation. And if there's a conversation you're avoiding, it's override. If your action is serving the pattern, adjust it. That's not a failure of the audit. That's the audit working. Keep this in mind and work on naming the pattern out loud when it shows up. Keep it neutral. Proving is active. This becomes everything. That phrasing is doing something. The pattern is happening. It isn't the whole person. One more thing before we close, because you just finished the last worksheet. Page 7 is a review page. The marking, the circling, the writing, that's done. You did the whole audit, and most people don't. Most people read about something like this and never put pen on a page. So here's what I really want you ready for. There's a part of you whose entire job is protecting the tender stuff. And it just watched you write down some of the tender stuff. So it's going to do something clever. It's going to congratulate you. It'll say, that was brave. That was a lot. You've earned a rest. Let's not overdo it. And every word of that is true, which is exactly why it works. But notice what it's asking for. It wants you to take the effort as the finish line. Accept the credit, close the folder, don't go any farther. It isn't trying to hurt you. It's trying to keep you from getting exposed again. So the real question, not a trap. Are you complete? Are you relieved to stop? Those feel almost identical from the inside. One of them is done. The other just doesn't want to look. If you're complete, that's a legitimate answer. But either way, come back to this. Run it again in a week or a month or whenever the field shifts, because pressure moves and the rules underneath it move a lot slower, which means a second reading tells you something a first one can't. It shows you what's actually recurring and what was only a hard week. That's the difference between a snapshot and knowing your own weather. In the last episode, we put it all together and review what made you visible and what to do with it when everything starts blending back into one thing.